And
Hello!
welcome to Orion!
Welcome. Hi, my name is Sam. This is Kim.
How you doing?
Good. I mean, listen, it's officially fall. Check this out.
I know.
I got a flannel on.
I needed to do flannel.
It's
I
a
feel like
flannel
I
kinda
missed
day.
my moment.
Football, flannel, fall.
Right? I had pumpkin spice this morning, though. Does that count?
That counts for sure.
It totally
Fall's
counts.
in full swing.
I
now,
know.
with the two of us doing this, there's no one to jump in the background and like.
Which is why we started things the way we did. Like we started way low.
Yeah, and I
Like,
was
where'd
like-
I go? Where'd I go?
I was like,
oh, I'm back.
hey!
See?
Yeah.
Like that.
As I'm talking, I may do like the. I may go downstairs in the middle of this thing.
We really do have things to tell you, though.
Yes.
We are in week 3 of our Questions for You series.
Yes.
And what's the question today, Sam?
It's about fear. Craig
Yes.
is talking about fear today. It's going to be a powerful message. The 9 o'clock was awesome. The 11
really
o'clock
was.
is going to be even better.
Yeah, but we are so glad you're with us online. So hang in there. Service is going to get rolling in a minute. Sam, biggest fear?
My biggest fear is definitely quicksand.
Quicksand. There he goes. There he goes.
I'm in quicksand
And he's
right now.
out. Oh,
Right now.
man.
There he
Okay.
goes.
Seriously, though, he will come back, I think, hopefully.
I'm back.
And he's back.
I'm back. It was
And-
temporary quicksand.
All right, week 3 coming at you.
Wait,
in
what's your
just a
biggest
minute.
fear?
Biggest fear? I really don't like heights. Super not a fan.
Yeah.
Not a
that's
fan.
A tough one.
Oh, and a weird fear of Ferris wheels.
I don't like those either. It's like janky. It's carnival.
I don't
it's,
know.
I don't know.
Strange.
I don't know.
Okay,
Not
that's
my
enough
thing.
for us.
Yeah.
Glad
Hey,
you're with
love you
us.
guys.
Love you
Glad you're here
guys.
with us.
Well, good morning, Kensington. Let's go ahead and stand up as we worship Jesus and celebrate Him this morning. In the reign of darkness, the reign of darkness now has ended. In the kingdom of light, in the kingdom of light, forever under your dominion. You're the king of my life. You're the king of my life. Come on, you sing. You reign above it all. You reign above it all. Yeah. Over the universe and over every heart, there is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. On the cross, the work was finished. God, you poured out your Yes, you reign above it all, forever victorious. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory. Yeah. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. You sing it. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Oh, you sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Yes, you sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Oh, you sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Oh, you reign above it all, you reign above it all, over the universe and over every heart. There is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. Let all of heaven and the earth erupt in song. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah to the everlasting one. There is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. Oh, yes, you reign above it all. You reign above it all. Come on, we sing that together. Sing, you reign above it all. You reign above it all. Come on, you sing it. Over the universe. Yeah. There is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. Let all of heaven and the earth erupt in song. Sing hallelujah to the everlasting one. There is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all.
God, you are Good morning, Kensington. Thank you all so much for worshiping with us today. If you could please take a seat and take a look at this video.
Hey Kensington, Craig McGlasson here. I am the lead pastor at our Orion campus, and a couple events that I just want to let you know about that we've got coming up. One of which is a do not miss event if you've got young kids. It is one of our faith and family events, and the focus on this one is going to be specifically on media and digital health. It's going to be led by expert Chris McKenna from the organization Protect Young Eyes. And it's going to be an entire evening trying to teach both the tools and the power as well as the dangers of all that faces our kids with technology. So this Faith and Family event is going to be on September 28th at 6 p.m. at our Troy campus. Dinner's going to be included and childcare if you need it for a small $10 fee. So you can register online at kensingtonchurch.org/faithandfamily. So I told you we have a couple of events to let you know about, and another one that's coming up is for our men. So I'm gonna kick it over to my friend Justin, who can tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so hey fellas, Man Camp is happening October 7th through 9th. It is our men's retreat for all of Kensington to gather together at a place called Spring Hill Camp, which is this incredible campground, has zip lining activities. We do football, tons of food. We have worship, and we have some incredible teachers. We have Craig Mays, we have John Pomeroy, and we also, we're gonna sacrifice by having Craig McGlasson with us.
They couldn't get anybody better.
But you know, I want to tell you, it is an incredible experience to get away. And I know this past season has felt busy at times, felt stressful, felt exhausting. And we believe that this weekend away will prepare us men for the days ahead and really speak to our hearts. Now, I know you're passionate about it, especially because you're speaking, but also just passionate about this for men. Why should they come? Why should they invite their friends to be there?
I think the things that have done the most formation in my life have been other men that have invested into my life, which is also why I think one of the greatest temptations in our society for men is to isolate and to just take life on their own. And yet that's the exact opposite of what we see in the life of Jesus, as he lived his life in community with men and women, but early on surrounded himself with his 12 disciples that just showed for us, I think, a really powerful example of how important it is for us to have other men in our life pushing us towards Jesus.
I couldn't agree more, because we've seen that in stories of men who have gone. So if you've been to Man Camp, invite somebody to join you, because you know the power of it. If you haven't been, take this opportunity and sign up. kensingtonchurch.org/mancamp, October 7th through 9th. Don't miss it.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everyone this morning? Doing well? Yeah? Okay. So, I mean, it's fall. Fall has officially, launched, I guess we would say, right? It's time for all things pumpkin spice, all things flannel, Detroit Lions football. Can I get an amen, hallelujah? Yeah? Come on, y'all. We got the Vikings today. That's a big deal, all right? They got blown out by the Eagles. We lost to the Eagles by just a little bit. NFL math says we're going to win, right? No. Okay, so we have a prayer team actually back in the prayer room praying for the Lions today. So if you would like to join that serve team, just kidding. Hey, we are super excited about both of those events that are coming up. The Faith and Family thing is happening this Wednesday night. And just to be clear, it's $10 for dinner, and they have childcare, and it's going to be an awesome event. My wife and I are going to be there. I actually have the privilege of hosting it, and it's at the Troy campus. And so if you have upper elementary, middle school, high school kids, you should come. It's all about navigating the digital world that they're engaging. We got this expert guy coming in. It's going to be absolutely incredible. So do everything you can to get there this Wednesday night. And then the second thing up there, Man Camp, October 7th through 9th, is also going to be incredible. How many of you guys have been to Man Camp before? Just a show of hands, okay? All right, yeah, quite a few of you. I've never been. This is going to be my first time. I'm a newbie. I get to host it with Drew Daniels. We're going to be the host, the MCs for the weekend. Our very own Craig McGlasson is going to be speaking, Saturday night, Craig? Is that right? Yeah? You're on Saturday night? Saturday night, he's speaking. John Pomeroy, who is also a great friend of Kensington and the Orion campus, he's going to be speaking there. And Craig Mays, the guy who spoke back on September 11th, he's going to be there. So it's going to be an awesome, awesome opportunity to just hang out with some guys and have a great weekend. So please take the opportunity, sign up, come hang out with us. It's going to be a blast. Now, one more thing I want to talk to you about, and that is how many of you in here are on a serve team, whether it be, don't raise your hand yet, I'm going to ask you to in a second, whether it be a Sunday morning or sometime throughout the week, you're part of the care ministry, you're part of the Detroit Lions prayer team, you're part of the kids ministry, the youth ministry, serve anywhere here in the life of Kensington. Let me see your hands. How many of you? Let me see. Raise them high, proud, yes, awesome. That is absolutely incredible. Listen, October 12th, we are having our next base camp. Our next base camp, which is our leadership gathering where we get together, we eat food, we hang out, we party, we have fun, we got some surprises for you, so it's gonna be absolutely incredible. Take the opportunity to take a picture of this QR code and register for that night, okay? Your team leaders should be reaching out to you with emails and stuff. If you serve in any capacity here at Kensington, whether on Sunday morning or throughout the week, this night is for you, and it's gonna be an awesome time for you to connect with each other and for us to just, eat some food, hang out, and give us an opportunity to celebrate you for serving here at this church. Cool? Cool. Can I get a little bobblehead? Cool. Yeah. Those of you who are joining us online, thanks for being with us. You've tuned into the Orion campus. We're so glad you're here. Now listen, this is also the time for us to launch groups. And one of those groups that has such a huge impact here and on many of the people who go here is this group called Alpha. And so we have Orion campus's very own Jim to get up and talk to us about Alpha. So check out this video.
My name is Jim. I've been here at Kensington for about 18 years, and most recently I went through an Alpha course. I had invited 4 younger people to attend Alpha with me. A few of them were new to the faith and kind of just exploring, just watching their eyes and watching them react to some of the content in Alpha. Excitement, curiosity, felt that they were really getting a great understanding of who Jesus was and his love for us. It's a great introduction to Christianity, but at the same time, for people that have been around for a long time, it's a perfect little refresher course because I definitely feel that a lot of us in my generation need to seek out the younger population today and have some answers for them when they ask. And I feel like Alpha has equipped me with that and really, I think, has made discipleship a little less complicated than I think many of us make it out to be. I have found that these groups are essential to me to really understand the process of living out my faith on a weekly basis.
So we would love to invite you to join us in Alpha. Jim is actually going to be in the lobby after service to answer any questions you may have out by the hub, our whole hub team out there. All of our groups are available, but if you're looking for a discipleship path, no matter where you are in your faith journey, but you're looking to take the next step, maybe you're looking to learn, maybe you're looking to grow, maybe you're looking for a refresher, Alpha could be perfect for you. So make sure you visit Jim out in the lobby and get plugged in. Because listen, guys, Sunday morning is just a small fraction of all the things that happen in the life of Kensington. It's just a small piece of your faith journey. And so we want to invite you to do life with us. Take your faith journey with us. And Alpha is a great place to start. So make sure you check that out. Now, we're in week 3 of our Question for You series, where we're looking at the questions that Jesus asked and how can we apply that to our lives. And so today we're talking about fear. And so some of you may remember a few weeks ago, I was jetting around the lobby here with a microphone and a camera following me, right? Some of you saw that and you were like, get away as fast as possible, right? And some of you, I even asked, I was like, hey, you want to be in a video? And you're like, hey, no. That happened more than once, actually. But for those of you who are, generous with your face on film, check out this video that's going to kind of set the trajectory for our morning today. Check it out. Hey, it's Sam Anderson here at the Orion campus, and we are doing a man on the street here, just seeing what are people afraid of. So let's see what we can get. Let's find out. Come on.
Dark.
The dark.
Spiders.
Spiders.
Spiders? You don't like spiders?
Spiders.
Spiders?
Yeah. Spiders, bees, and mosquitoes. Spiders.
I'm afraid of spiders crawling in my shoes, and then I put the shoes on, and there's a spider in there,
And then it
there's
feels
nothing I
like
can do.
your giant toes are attacking it? Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, what about you? What are you afraid of?
Swimming in a lake that I can't see the bottom.
Really?
Really.
Are you afraid of like the Loch Ness Monster or something? What are you thinking?
Something might grab me.
It's just murky. Yeah,
I know what she's
I know.
afraid of.
What?
She's afraid of the Grinch.
I'll keep it all.
Are you afraid of the Grinch? Is it the yellow eyes?
No, it's just everything about him.
Olives. Like black olives, green olives, all the olives.
All the olives.
All the olives.
I'm afraid of some animals. Like, I want a pet snake, but like I'm terrified of
You
them.
have a pet snake?
I want one,
Oh.
but I'm scared of them.
Falling off a cliff.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you hang out on the edge of cliffs?
No, not much. So
Okay.
I'm
So that's
safe.
a pretty manageable fear.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Failure.
Failure?
Yeah.
In what way? What do you mean?
Relationships with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Failing at being the head of the house.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of probably losing someone in my family or that's someone close to me.
I'm sort of a perfectionist, so
Really?
I would say failure, probably.
Fear of failure.
Yeah.
What if I walked into your house and reorganized all your books? Or I took all your clothes and messed them up? Would that?
Yeah, no, but if I knew you were mad at me and that's why you were doing it, then I would be upset.
Failure.
Failure?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know that won't live up to the expectations of a parent, even though we're learning it every day.
Yeah.
And every day's a
journey,
new
it's a
chance.
process,
It is.
yeah.
It is.
I mean, I'm afraid of losing my kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the deepest fear, you know, the one
Yeah.
that makes me feel a little weepy.
My kids' health.
Your kids' health? That's the main thing? That's what keeps you up at night?
The only thing that makes me a little bit nervous about life.
Having deteriorating health when I get older.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm kind of afraid of that.
Yeah.
I don't have kids right now, so I'm gonna be real. Me and my husband been married almost 9 years, and I'm still thinking about having kids, but having kids kind of makes me nervous.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some fears. But first, is Sam in the room? Where'd he go, Amber? He just left you? Just took off? All right, because I got to call him out. This is the second time today now at the start of a service that he's talked about football for fall, and he's left out the most important thing that happens this time of year. Hello. Thank you. Whoop. Bambi goes down in 5 days until the boat opener. Good grief, Sam. Anybody can throw a football. Jeez. Well, there's my hunters in the room and my non-hunters in the room. Welcome to Orion. Glad to have you. So, and just to get back at you, I'm going to put pictures up over the next month. So there you go. No, I'm not actually. So fears, I found it very interesting that apparently Orion has got a massive spider phobia. What the heck? So how many of you did not find your way onto film and yet you still are afraid of spiders? Okay. About the same amount in first service. So a couple weeks from now, without any warning, we're just going to unleash a bunch of daddy long legs in the room and see what y'all do. It's going to be good. I remember when I was a kid, my fear is never spiders. Never had a thing with spiders. Even the other day, my wife, Nicole, remember this? She called me. She's like, there's a spider on the counter. Deal with it, deal with it. And she's like slamming on the counter. I'm like, what are you doing? Just picked it up. And she's like, what are you doing with it? I'm like, honey, just take it easy. It's just a sweet little thing. And then I put it in the garbage disposal. So we got rid of it. But for me, it was always sharks. Like Renee, who was on there that said murky water or like dark water because something's going to reach up and grab you, like hands down, that's always been my fear. I was with some friends in Kentucky recently, and we were out in the lake. It was Lake Cumberland, and huge, beautiful lake, but there's spots where it gets like 600 feet deep. And I was like, I hate this lake. I don't want to even be in the water. They're like, what's your problem? I'm like, I'm telling you, man, there's bodies in here. I just know it, and something's going to grab me. But then I think about sharks. If I can't see in the water, I'm convinced sharks are there. Except for when I was a kid, I actually was convinced that sharks were going to be in pools. Super weird, but I was like 7 years old. I went with my aunt across state. Oh, Sam, welcome. Nice of you to join us. I just told everybody that you forgot to mention that this is also the time of year for not just football, but hunting, of course. I just fell off the stage. And it's going to happen one day or another. Hey, I just want to make a point, by the way. I just fell off the stage, and I didn't break my ankle. So Jeremiah at our Clarkson campus, there you go. That one's for you. Hunting, yeah. So you're not welcome to come this year because you forgot it. All right, back on track. Where was I at? I do this for a living. Sharks and pools, yes. Sharks and pools. So 7 years old, my aunt takes me across the country from Michigan to Washington State to visit my grandpa. We make a 2-week trip out of it. We stop at all these different hotels and landmarks along the way, and all I wanted to do was swim every day. So I'm in every pool, swimming all day until the night that my grandma let me watch Jaws, which was not a great idea for a 7-year-old, because after that, I was genuinely terrified that this shark was gonna be in the water and come after me. So what do you do when you've got a fear that takes hold? whether it's a rational fear or an irrational fear. As a matter of fact, let's even just take a minute and kind of group participation. Turn to somebody near you and just take a second and tell them about some kind of a silly, irrational fear that you've had throughout your life. Whether you got over it as an adult or whether you still have one now, turn to somebody around you, you're like, I didn't come with anybody. Make a friend and just tell somebody next to you really quickly, take a minute, swap stories. What is a crazy, irrational fear that you've had throughout your life? So one of my irrational fears, I've gotten over the shark thing, by the way, so that doesn't work anymore for me. But one of my current irrational fears is turbulence. Anybody else? I don't know what happened, but like 6 years ago, it's like somebody just decided it's time for this guy to be afraid of turbulence and flipped a switch inside me. And I'm just gonna be honest, there have been moments where my kids and I have flown together. They've heard words I should not have said because turbulence, the plane was doing things it shouldn't do. So like whatever happened to me a couple years ago, I freak out at turbulence. I've tried to talk myself off the ledge. I try to tell myself all kinds of things. I try to breathe better and I freak out. Recently, my wife and I, we've been getting to know some new friends that are part of Orion, and he is a commercial pilot. So we were having dinner a couple weeks ago, and we were joking about this, and he goes, I can solve this for you. He goes, did you know that in the history of aviation, no plane has ever gone down because of turbulence? And as he finished that sentence, my brain went, till one does. Like there's like no getting over this fear for whatever reason. So here, I'm gonna help you out right now, and I'm gonna solve any potential fear you'll ever have with a data point. You ready? Some of you may know this, some of you may not. 85% of the things that you are afraid of will never happen. 85% of them. Think about whatever it is. Plane going down in turbulence, spiders in the auditorium, whatever it is, never gonna happen 85%. And of the 15% that will happen, most of us find out that they're not as bad as we thought, or we can handle them better than we realized we would. So there you go. Problem solved. New data point that will now alleviate at least 85% of all future fears. Fear-free living is yours. Sermon's over. Band can come back out. We can all just go home. And it'd be awesome if it was that simple. If you could just tell yourself something about the rationality or the irrationality of your fear and just make it all better. But here's the truth. Whether fear is rational at times or even at moments where it's irrational, it's powerful. Because there's also times where there's fear that may not fit into the 85%, or fear that may not fit into the 15% rather. It does fit into the 85%, real fears that still will never happen, and yet they can grip us. My wife and I experienced this in a very real way when our daughters were born. They're 15 right now, they're twins. But when they were born about 6 months after my family lost a 6-month-old nephew who there was never a reason for it. They put him down for a nap, and then that was it. And so that fear for a year, I mean, it had us sleeping with our ear next to their faces and waking them up multiple times in the night and not getting sleep ourselves just because of the panic of what if and what could be. Fear, whether it's rational or irrational, is absolutely powerful. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why all throughout the Bible, from the prophets to the apostles, the disciples, to Jesus himself, there are consistent messages about fear. And the consistency of those messages to us is that as we trust in Jesus, we have nothing. Everybody say the word nothing. We have nothing in this life that we need to be afraid of, which is an absurd claim, but a true one. So I want to try and understand a little bit more, how in the world do we face life and not let fear overwhelm us? Because some of you are dealing with something right now. And if you're not now, you will be. It's the cycle of life where there's a fear that will come at you, whether it's a fear of future, whether it's a fear of health, or a fear in a relationship, or a fear of the economy, or a fear of your job, whatever it is, a fear of that thing that doesn't feel right when you touch it and maybe you should go to the doctor, but you don't want, and whatever it is, there's a fear. And I want you to get it out right now. I want you to visualize it. I want you to name it. And we're going to ask God that he would do something very real to speak into that this morning. That we don't just walk out of this room in a little bit of time from now and just have some religious idea, but we have something that we deeply believe, in fact, has the power to conquer any fear and give to us what the Bible talks about, which is a peace that no matter what we face, it transcends all situations. So let me pray. Father, I am very convinced that you are the source of all courage. You are the source of all strength. And so I pray that as we dive into the subject on fear and really try to understand, Jesus, when you said multiple times over to your disciples that they need not be afraid, that you would help us to understand how that's actually possible. Because there's a lot of things in this world and there's a lot of things in our personal lives right now that are pressing, that are overwhelming, that are frustrating, and that are fear inciting. And so I pray that you would teach us how your words are true, how they're real, and how they penetrate to the deepest parts of who we are, giving sustainability no matter the situation we face. I pray that you'd meet us all in the different places that we're coming from, Jesus, some convinced of you, some doubting you, some trying to explore you. Is there a you? And just do what only you can do that I could never do from the stage to transcend through all of our questions, all of our doubts, all of the different places that we're at in our journey. And meet us today. And just, would you do something, I pray, to show yourself real, to show yourself as the God of creation, and to show yourself as the one who loves us with an immeasurable love. In Jesus' name, amen. So one of the things we're going to do before we go any further is we're going to take up our offering this morning. And if you've been joining us again in the last couple of weeks, or if you've been with us the last couple of weeks, you know that we have started going back to an old way of doing this. So we are passing things now. It's a good sign that we are coming to the other side of COVID now that we can pass and touch things. So we've got some people that are going to come forward. We're going to pass buckets around. I'm supposed to give a little bit of instruction on how this goes. That's the dangerous part of today. Usually do not trust me for details, but here's how I'm going to try. So you're going to start from the left side of the room, which would be, I guess, the right side. I'm looking the wrong way. I'm already messing up. You're going to pass down. And when you get to the end of your row, you're going to pass back, and you're going to pass down again, and then you're going to set it on the floor, and somebody will collect it up. So as that's happening, just know that this whole effort and this whole moment is about one ultimate thing, and it is, as a community of faith, we are trusting in Jesus to do the work that he's done in our lives by using this, our little bit that we go, hey, here you go, God, by doing that same work in other people's lives, around us here, around the world. So everything that we do, every life that we touch is because of your generosity. So I just want to say thank you for that. And all right, looks like you've got it regardless of my messed up details. So in the Bible, there are multiple phrases about fear. Multiple times even that Jesus himself said things like, ask questions like, why are you afraid? Question the source of our fear. There's no need to be afraid. Even the phrase, do not be afraid specifically, occurs 365 times. And I think that's interesting because what else is 365? Right, the days of the year. It's almost as if God was giving us a daily reminder that there is nothing when you are in him that you need live with fear of. So finish the statement for me. It's a quote, you'll know it. Franklin Roosevelt once said it. There is nothing to fear but wrong, according to Chapman University at least. So there's an organization, a university that's been conducting like a survey for the last 10 years or so on what the average American is afraid of. And I want to put up 2 different years just to show what some of the things are that make the list, but also show the evolution of what our fears have come from and turned into at present day. So this is 2015, according to Chapman University. You can read them all. I won't read every one of them, but corruption of government officials, which you'll find interesting, even present day, that's still number 1 on the list. Cyber terrorism, corporate tracking of personal information, terrorist attacks, bio-warfare, identity theft, economic collapse, running out of money, credit card fraud. So this is 2015 top fears. If I was to put all of those into a category, it would basically be this, being taken advantage of. 2015, that was kind of our biggest fear. Somebody was gonna dupe us, lie to us, take advantage of us. Now go to present day, same organization, here's present day fears. It's also funny, by the way, that there's no graphics and images and fun little characters. I don't know if this is just Cutbacks like everybody else. They had to fire their creative department, but this is what they got now. Number one, still, government taking advantage of us and corruption. But watch the rest of the list evolve. People I love passing away or dying. A loved one contracting the coronavirus. People I love becoming seriously ill. Civil unrest, pandemic, financial collapse. You can see the rest. If I was to categorize all of these, compared to 2015, it would be death and destruction. So there are things that I think we live in the very real presence of fear of. And I think fears, although they're individual for all of us, they also evolve. Like just seeing from 2015 to present day, there's a very interesting evolution of the things that we are more on guard about, that we are more fearful of, that we have more concern over. There's a series of articles, as a matter of fact, that I took some titles from, one of which even just, the whole article is titled The Age of Uncertainty and describes the current age that we presently live in as an age of uncertainty. There's ages of technology, age of advancements, all kinds of other ages that they kind of list out over time, but that the present time that we live in, they say is an age of uncertainty, which you know as well as I do, is when you have any level of uncertainty that you live with, especially the greater the levels of uncertainty, that brings on anxiety, it brings on concern, it brings on nervousness, and it brings on fear. And then there's just other articles, just some of the more, last couple of weeks, some of the more top of the line articles. The China Trap is called one, a U.S. foreign policy and perilous logic of zero-sum competition. The fear of competing countries and competing resources. Another one, the world that Putin wants, how distortions about the past feed delusions about the future. Or another one, Ukraine holds the future, the war between democracy and nihilism. Another one, spirals of delusion, how AI distorts decision-making and makes dictators more dangerous. One article went on to say this: nothing feels safe anymore. Americans are divided, anxious, and quick to panic. And then one comment from one of the articles simply says this: although the country has suffered through far higher crime rates and similar periods of deep political division, we are currently in uncharted territory in terms of the levels of anxiety, said Chuck Wexler, executive director of the Police Executive Research Forum in Boston. We live in an age of uncertainty that has presented to us a whole lot of things to be concerned about and to be worried about. Many of them are outside of us, but for each of you, there's a list and a level of personal fears that you have. Whether or not you'd even describe them maybe as fears, the things that just bring anxiety, the things that bring concern, the things that keep you up at night, the what-ifs of life and the what-ares that are currently happening. How do we deal with them? Like, what do we really do to get through them? Because I hope you're like me in that, number one, I believe this book really is given from God, but this can't just be to have like cute little verses that we throw at moments of life. Like there is deep truth in here that if it truly does, as I believe, have the power to shape and reshape our lives, then there should be truth in here that supports what Jesus said when he said, you don't need to be afraid. So how? So in the last couple of weeks, I've really been asking God, all right, where do we go with this one? We're gonna talk about fear, and there's a whole lot of things that bring up fear. So God, where do you want me to go on this? What do you want me to teach? What's the subject you wanna lead me to? And I really do believe the place that God took me to, it's an oldie, but it's a goodie. So 1 Samuel chapter 17 is where we're gonna go, and we could just sum it up as a story of a giant fear. If you've got a Bible, you're gonna wanna go there and follow along. If you don't, we're gonna put it all up on the screen so that you can follow along. 1 Samuel 17, I'm gonna read a little bit, make a couple explanations, make a couple of points before we all go home. So 17, verse 1. Now the Philistines had gathered their forces for war, and they had assembled together. They pitched their camp, and Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah, and they drew up their battle lines to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill, and the Israelites another, with the valley in between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was about 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor and bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and he shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come out and come down to face me. And if he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become ours, and you will serve us." And then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. So give me a man and let us fight each other." And on hearing this, the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and, say it, what? Dismayed and terrified. Why? Because a giant stood in front of them. They were dismayed and they were terrified. I think fear is a lot like that. It feels like standing in front of a giant with overwhelming odds. Now, let me give you a little bit of history real quick for context. So if you don't know this part of the Bible, the Israelites in the nation of the Hebrews at 400 years earlier had been captives to the Egyptian Empire. And 400 years earlier, God, through Moses, ends up making a promise to his people that he's going to lead them out of captivity and take them to a land of their own, where they can govern themselves. They won't be under oppression anymore. They won't be under slavery anymore. And then he goes even further and he says it's going to be a land of resources. He actually says it's going to be flowing with milk and honey. In other words, you won't have need. The land itself will provide for you, produce for you. He says it's a place where I will be your God. You will be my people. So he makes this unbelievable promise 400 years ago to his people, a promise of this land, literally a promised land. And he brings them to it. And for 400 years, there are moments where they taste this land, where they live in the good season of the promised land, flowing with milk and honey. These are the good moments of life, the good seasons of life. But they've also had a lot of moments that feel more like this one, that they're presently in. Moments where the promised land is turned into a battlefield. Moments where the milk and the honey seem to have dried up and they're replaced with a formidable giant, a threatening giant. And they're in war. Moments where it's not a land of peace, it's a land of violence. And war of any kind is horrible. But you add to it this overwhelming presence of this giant of a man that's taunting the nation, and it's terrifying. There are some things that we know from the scriptures and from the description about Goliath that help paint a little bit more of the picture of what they're going up against. For example, we know that Goliath was probably somewhere between 8.5 and 9.5 feet tall. Now, when you take into account that the average Israelite was probably about 5'3", that's a massive height difference. It just in and of itself, the stature is terrifying. I was trying to think, even coming into today, like, how do we get a picture of this in our minds? I think this is the only way I could come up with, is Shaquille O'Neal next to Kevin Hart. And Shaquille O'Neal, mind you, is only 7'1", so you got to put a few more feet on him. Like, just imagine walking up to this kind of a monster of a man. And then on top of that, the weapons he's using are also incredibly intimidating. There's a number of people that have set out, based on the descriptions in the Bible, the weaver's rod and the weight of the spearhead, to recreate what a realistic spear would have looked like that Goliath carried. This is just one of those renditions. Like, can you imagine that being picked up to be tossed at you? Like, you build houses out of stuff like that. This was his spear. And then you also consider the fact that Goliath probably didn't just like, hey, he's a big guy, let's take him to battle with us. He would have been identified pretty early on as somebody that could have and should have been a warrior because of his stature. So he's been trained probably his entire life to be a fighter. You put all this together, this dude is a formidable force. And while Israel doesn't have a Goliath, what they do have is a Saul. So Saul is king of Israel. He's the first king, as a matter of fact. For the longest time, as Israel has lived their experience in this land of milk and honey and this promised land, God was literally at the top. Like, he led everything, but there's a point where they got jealous of all the other nations around them. Like, hey, everyone else has got a king. We want a king. Give us a king. God's like, you don't need a king. I'm your king. He's like, they're like, we want a king. So he's like, okay, you can have a king. So God picks this guy Saul, who we're told in part, like, stands out leaps and bounds from everybody else in the nation. He's attractive. He's assertive. He's a warrior himself, and there's actually a place in the same book we're reading now that tells us that Saul stood ahead above all the rest of the Israelites. So the average Israelite is 5'3". A head is usually somewhere between 8 inches and 10 inches, so he's over 6 feet tall. Again, he's not Goliath, but he's bigger than everybody else. So, I mean, he's a warrior, he's tall, he's king. This is the man that anybody would have naturally thought, if anyone's gonna go toe-to-toe with Goliath, we're calling on Saul. And here's the crazy thing. Not only does he not speak up, while Goliath is out there taunting the nation, he doesn't show up either. Like, he never even comes to the battle. Enter David. So David shows up on the scene, and David, if you don't know some of the backstory to this part of the Bible, some of us, maybe all you know is David and Goliath, and David defeats Goliath. If you didn't know that, spoiler alert, that's what happens. But David, at this point when he shows up, is probably about 15 years old. Prior to this moment, David has been picked among his family as the person that will eventually succeed Saul and be the king over Israel. But at this moment, he's about to show up, he's about to speak, he's about to kind of call out what it is that he sees happening between the two nations. But at the moment that he does, he's a nobody. He's just some 15-year-old kid that shows up on the battlefield with a bunch of hardened soldiers, and he's nobody to them. He's not in their minds like future king. He just shows up and he starts to speak with a bit of courage. Verse 26, and David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" So first thing David does is he just starts to call out reality. One of the most, I think, important aspects of any form of leadership is to identify reality, and that's what David begins to do. First thing he does, he identifies reality. You've got this guy, you've got us, and then he says, who is this man that he defies the armies of? Now here's what's interesting. There's a lot of ways he could have finished that. He could have said the armies of Israel, the armies of Saul. He could have even been kind of cocky enough to say the armies of me, because he knows he's been assigned to be the future king, even though everybody else doesn't know it. He could just be like, hey, this is eventually my army. Who's defying my army? But he says, who is this man that defies the armies of who? God. What's funny is that a minute ago, when Goliath was taunting Israel, he actually said, I'm defying the armies of Israel. What he didn't realize is that as he went against God's children, he went against God. And so David, realizing that the offense is against God, will make his appeal to God. Now, before he goes to make his appeal to God, he goes to the king. So he goes to the cowardly king Saul, and he says, hey, listen, here's the deal. I'm gonna give you a bit of my back history. I'm a shepherd boy. I've been tending my dad's sheep. There's once a bear came out, took care of the bear. Once a lion came out, took care of the lion. God helped me overcome them, protected everything. I'm not a warrior, but I've got some skill. I'm gonna go take this guy on in the name of Jesus, in the name of God. And so Saul's like, good, go. I'm a coward. You have at it. And so literally not long later, David finds himself, 15-year-old boy, on the battlefield, staring this giant face to face. This literal embodiment of fear that's gripping an entire nation. I wonder if there's anything that you feel like you're staring in the face right now. A fear about something in your family, or a fear about someone in your family, or a fear about the future, a fear about your job, a fear about your health. Some kind of a fear that you feel like you're staring eye to eye. And you feel the pit in your stomach at times. And you think all of the what if thoughts. And you go to all the worst case scenarios. I bet David had at least a moment where he felt some of that. He's not just human, this is a 15-year-old kid. There had to be a moment that he felt some of this as well. And yet what we know is that David took all of that fear and was somehow able to push it aside. I'm gonna look at in a minute how I think he did that and how we can too, and then go toe-to-toe with Goliath. We need to see just some of the dialogue back and forth between the two of them as they go to war with each other. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David, and he looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and so he despised him. And he said to David, am I a dog that you've come out with sticks? And the Philistines cursed David by his gods. Come up here, he said, and I will give you and your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. And David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcass of the Philistine army to the birds and to the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David, and this will be important because we're gonna come back to this, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. I think when you're facing a fear, it's gotta feel something like what David had to at some point feel as he stood there. It feels like you're facing a formidable giant, an overwhelming fill in the blank. Something that's overwhelming enough that there's overwhelming uncertainty about the outcome, overwhelming fear, overwhelming concern. It's an overwhelming strength. It's an overwhelming force. It's an overwhelming giant. And so what we tend to do when we're faced with any form of fear, and we all know this, is that there's actually a chemical, biological reaction that starts to take place. In your brain, you begin to release chemicals that give you the sense to do one of two things: run from it or fight it. And so when we fight it, if it's with a person, maybe we posture up too, we start to yell back as well, we pull other people onto our side, or we turn to somebody else to argue the case for us, or whatever we do, we go to battle. There are ways that we go to battle. Or oftentimes with fear, if we're fleeing it, if we're running from it, this is where we start to just bury our head in the sand. This is where whatever it is, I don't know how to deal with it. It feels too overwhelming. The giant is too big. And so instead, this is where I'll just turn myself to my hobby and I'll ignore it. Or this is where often addictions will emerge from, affairs will emerge from. It's because this is our form of kind of fleeing and getting away from it. Here's the problem. No matter what you do, no matter how strong you are, how bold you are, how fast you run, how much you ignore, there is no source of strength within us to completely and effectively squash fear. And here's why. Because the truth of fear is that every single thing in this world that has the power to beckon fear out of us is a result of one ultimate thing. It is sin and rebellion against God and his way of life. Whether directly from your life or whether the indirect reality of human existence. Think about it. I mean, because some of you, maybe you're even challenging me in your head right now. You're like, I don't know if that's true about every fear. Think about it. Every fear, everyone in this life is a result of, if there is a God who says this is the way life is meant to work, when we rebel and sin against him and say, no, I'm gonna make life work my way, everything begins to break. And in that breaking becomes all the effect of the brokenness. And so if fear is the product of brokenness and rebellion and sin against God, then the only thing in all this world that can effectively deal with fear is Jesus Christ, the one who effectively deals with sin and rebellion and brokenness. And this isn't like the church answer, like I remember in Sunday school, whenever there was a question on anything, we would all just shout out, Jesus! And it's like C on the exam, right? You're just like, you're bound to probably get it right. Like, this isn't like trying to dumb down and oversimplify just our faith. It is to say, though, that I really do believe that there are so many of us that God is just waiting for you to take your hands off of the problem that you're trying to solve, off of the fear that is overwhelming you, and give it to him and let him deal with it by trusting in him. I don't know what the fear is, but it takes on all different kinds of sizes. Sometimes the giant of fear in our life, it is the economy, or it is family, or, as a matter of fact, here's an interesting nugget for you. The Babylonian Talmud tells us that, so this is writing outside the Bible, but tells us that David and Goliath were possibly distant cousins because their great-grandmothers were sisters. And when I realized that recently and read that, I thought, isn't that interesting? Because I think sometimes our greatest levels of fear will come from our closest places. So I don't know what your giant is, if it's close to home, if it's something that maybe could be but isn't yet. I don't know what the fear is. Maybe it's something you're caught up in, the days ahead. But I know that when you're facing it, your natural tendency will be to fight it or to run from it. But here's what's so interesting. What did David do? I pointed out a minute ago. When Goliath started closing in, what did David do? Ran towards it. Yeah. Now, I've always been taught, anybody else this? You never run from a fight, but you don't run towards a fight either, right? You don't try to start a fight, but if you get caught up one, you don't run from it. Here's David. He's like, no, I'm gonna run to it. Here comes the 9.5-foot giant, and I'm gonna run to it. Here's why I think this is interesting, because when we live in fear to something, what we've literally done is we've attached ourselves. Imagine a rope. Matter of fact, you don't even have to imagine. I'm gonna show it. So I asked for a little bit of help from the only Goliath I could come up with here at Orion. So Chuck, can you come on out? Chuck is our resident Goliath if you haven't met him yet. There you go.
All right, I'm ready.
Like seriously, cameras, just like zoom in on his biceps for a minute. Like, go ahead. No, he's gonna flex. There he goes. Right, nice. I just want to point out that I intentionally wore a long sleeve shirt today knowing I'd be on stage with you. So, so here's what happens. When you and I live with any form of fear, no matter how small or how great, what we've done is we've attached ourselves to the fear. He's my giant. He's my Goliath. And so the problem is when he goes left, I go left. If he goes right, I go right. If the fear goes up, I go up. If the fear goes down, I go down. When you're attached to what you're afraid of, it controls you. How do you attach yourself? Emotionally, mentally, so it's my thoughts, even behaviorally. Like that fear begins to dictate what I'm going to do or not going to do or how I'll treat people. So the problem is you literally become attached to your fear. Here's what David did. By David rushing in to meet Goliath in battle, essentially this is what he did, is he said, no, I'm cutting the string. And here's what is so powerful about what he did. I think what David really ultimately ends up doing is what we can end up doing as well. This is gonna sound way more Dr. Seuss than I meant it to when I thought of it during the week, but I think there's power and truth in this reality. When you cut the string, you turn it into a sling. And you use the very things that the enemy is trying to keep you wrapped up in with fear as the weapon that you throw some truth back at him for defeat. And here's what I mean. There are things that you and I need to continue to remind ourselves of. Truths about who God is that I think the more they sink in, that they're not just thoughts, they become our present reality. That's why even one place in the Bible says, as someone thinks, so they are. As a man thinks in his mind and his heart, so he is. There is a reality that your ability to shape your reality starts oftentimes in your mentality. When we think, we become. And there are truths about who God is that I think have the power to help us overcome any fear that we face. For example, truth number one, and it's the first stone that we sling back. And I thought about, like, when I came up with this analogy, I thought about hurling. I actually have a rock in here. I was like, maybe I should try and hurl a rock across the stage as my example. And I thought, that's gonna go really bad. I'm gonna hit somebody or myself in the head with it. But I want you to imagine that there's a couple things I think we can begin to hurl back at the enemy. We can begin to hurl back at the world. We can begin to hurl back at the giant of whatever fear it is that comes against us. Number one, we hurl back the rock of trust. Trust and confidence that God is bigger than anything that we face. One of the things that David did early on is he went to Saul and he began to make an argument for his ability to go against Goliath, in part on what he had previously done and how God had come through for him. I went up against a lion, I went up against a bear, and God spared me, God saved me, God overcame in those moments. So part of what he's doing in this present moment is he's defaulting back to past moments that God has been faithful. And this became a lifestyle for him. Matter of fact, the book of Psalm, largest book in the Bible, written by David, it literally is a book of him consistently over and over and over and over again saying essentially two things. I'm overwhelmed, life is taking me down, it's frustrating, but God has always come through and will again. I mean, if you sum up the whole book of Psalm, that's kind of it. It's David constantly falling back on the past faithfulness of God to have confidence in the present and future faithfulness of God. And maybe you're like, well, I haven't been on this journey very long. I couldn't fill up a book. But you have something. Even if your something is just God's faithfulness to bring you into the awareness that he is and he loves you and you can have relationship with him. But over time, that book begins to grow. And part of what we have to do is we have to continue to remind ourselves of the truth that our God is bigger than anything that we face. You know, one of the things that's interesting in this story, a detail that only stood out to me for the first time ever recently. It says after David had run to meet him in battle, verse 49 says, reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead. Now here's what I thought when I was reading that. How true is it that there are just certain things that we need to start letting sink in to our heads? Certain truths that we just need to continue to remind ourselves of over and over and over again until it sinks in. And one of those truths is this: our God is bigger than anything that we face. I sat in the hospital room with Roland recently. Some of you remember the story of Roland. He was a biker, was in a charity biking event. was hit by a woman who swerved around traffic. 2 of the riders he was riding with lost their lives in that accident. His body was wrecked from top to bottom. Last week when I sat with him, I think he's 5 or 6 weeks in to being in the hospital. He has about as many more to go, most of which he'll spend in a bed trying to recover from a damaged hip and arm and ribs and legs and what was interesting to me is as I sat there talking to him, I'm asking questions about his injuries and what's happened and the recovery process. And at one point, he shifted to his confidence in God's faithfulness. He started telling me times in the past that God has been faithful to him. And then he started even telling me about how in this very situation, God was being faithful to him. And he wasn't denying reality. It's not like he's delusional. Not like he's being like overly spiritual. Because you know how sometimes we can do that? Like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Your life is falling apart. You're not fine. It wasn't that kind of a thing. Because there were equally moments where he sat there and he talked to me with sadness about the fact that he's going to be in the hospital for his 20th anniversary. That he's going to be in the hospital for his daughter's birthday. For sports events with his kids that he's going to miss while he's in the hospital. About the long road to recovery. About even the fear about whether or not and when and how he can get back on his bike in the future. And I think what's interesting, especially with Roland, is he's kind of a summation of so many of what could be our fears in life. Relational fears, fears of our own health, fears of the future, fears financially, and it's like all converging for him. And I'm sitting there listening to this guy talk in that place about the faithfulness of God, even in the midst of what he was going through. Here's what he was ultimately saying. I trust that God is bigger even than this. You hurl that stone back again and again and again, and it starts to knock the giant down. I also think another stone we can hurl back is the stone and the rock of joy. Psalm 51, this is what David once said, again, in a moment where he's feeling defeated and overwhelmed. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. She's saying, I need some sustaining in this moment, God, because it's about to overwhelm me. It's about to overtake me. So what does he say? Restore to me, not restore to me the calmness of life again, or not restore to me the health of my own body again, or not restore to me a life with no fear in this moment. Here's what he wants restored, because it's what fear takes away. He says, restore to me joy, but he attaches that joy to the source of God. He says, restore to me the joy of your salvation. She says, what I need in the moments of my fear is I need confidence and certainty that you are good, you are with me, you are my salvation, and there is a joy in that I need to be attached to again. I really do believe that one of the most dangerous weapons we can throw at any giant of fear is joy. I think the enemy hates it. I think the giants in our life hate it. And I think fear and joy are equally a choice, and both erode the other. When you choose fear, it erodes joy. When you choose joy, it begins to erode fear. But you can't choose joy in the midst of fear unless you believe something very deeply that you have to, again, let press into your thoughts, press into your head. And it's simply this: if number one, God is bigger, number two, God is better. He is better. He's better than anything and everything in this life. And that's what David would conclude time and time again, even when he had betrayal of his family, even when he had betrayal of his own son, is that he would conclude consistently throughout the course of his life, God is better than the worst of moments. He is better than the best of moments. And he attached himself to something far deeper than just the up and the down of this life, but to the sustaining reality of the joy found in the salvation of knowing God through Jesus Christ. And then lastly, I think we attach ourselves to this: hope. I think the rock we throw out at whatever we face is the rock of hope. Here's the amazing thing about being a follower of Jesus. We have a playbook, and we know how this ends. There's no mystery about where this is all going to culminate one day. Last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, chapter 21, gives an account of what will one day be versus what presently is. The Apostle John wrote this once: "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven, prepared as a bridegroom, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and he himself will be their God." And this is what he says. "I will wipe away every tear from their eye, and there will be no more death, mourning, crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." You and I live right now in the current order. But the promise of the Bible is that there is a new order to one day come. And the new order will erase everything broken in this current order. It will erase all the tears. It will erase all the mourning, all the crying, all the suffering. It will erase all the giants. There is a day that this order will pass away. And it will be at the word of only one being, and that's Jesus Christ. When he stands from the throne he is presently seated in and says, "Enough is enough, done with this order." And it's not like, hear me, this isn't like an order that we all go floating around in heaven with harps and baby diapers and all that weird stuff that we think of. This is where he takes literally this present reality and recreates it. Do you know there will be a new earth? Not just a heaven, there will be a new earth where we will walk on this planet in the condition it was meant to be, where we ourselves will live in the condition we were meant to be. Like there's a day where Jesus is just gonna say, "Enough, enough," and the new order of experience will begin. And if you believe that, then here's what we also believe. No matter what happens to you in your life, you can't lose. That's what the Apostle Paul was saying when he once said, "To live is Christ and to die is gain." If I'm alive, I win. If I die, I win. Why? Because a new order is coming where none of this brokenness exists. What he's saying is, you can't lose. When you're in Christ, you can't lose because he wins. Do you know what loses? I'll give you the list. Sickness loses. Corruption loses. Inflation loses. Depression loses. Cancer loses. Racism loses. Hatred loses. War loses. Hunger loses. Suffering loses. Every broken, fear inciting part of this order one day loses because Jesus wins. That's the last truth to continue to put in your minds when you face anything of fear. Our God wins. And when Jesus stepped into this creation, and when God stood among what he had made, he used his voice to call the dead from the tombs, to shut the mouths of demons, to calm the storms. And in doing so, he was abundantly clear to all of us for all time. I am bigger, I am better, and I win. Those are the truths to camp our life on. And when we do, no giant can stand in front of us. That's the power of the Old Testament and the New. Why go to the Old Testament when we're talking about something Jesus once said? Because the entirety of the Old Testament is a setup. It is the foreshadowing. It's the early credit roll to Jesus' grand entrance into humanity, where he would tell us that one day he's got the final word. Not this order, but his order, because our God is bigger, our God is better, and our God eventually wins. Father, I just pray that you would do what only you can do, to help us understand truths that are yours, that me or no one else from a stage could communicate to the depths of our soul. So would you do that work, I pray, Jesus, our God and our King, who is bigger, who is better, and who wins.
He's in the waiting. And hold on to your hope as your triumph unfolds. He's never failing. He's never failing. Oh. Sing praise, my soul. Find strength in joy. Let His words lead you on. Do not forget His great faithfulness. Finish all He's begun. So take courage, my heart. Stay steadfast, my soul. He's in the waiting. He's in the waiting. Hold on to your hope as your triumph unfolds. He's never failing. He's never failing. So take courage, my heart. Stay steadfast, my soul. He's in the waiting. He's in the waiting. Hold on to your hope as your triumph unfolds. He's never failing. He's never failing. And you hold the stars, who call them each by name, will surely keep your promise to me that I will rise in your victory. And you hold the stars, who call them each by name, will surely keep your promise to me that I will rise in your victory. So take courage, my heart. Stay steadfast, my soul. He's in the waiting. He's in the waiting. And hold on to your hope as your triumph unfolds. He's never failing. He's never failing. So take courage, my heart. Stay steadfast, my soul. He's in the waiting. He's in the waiting. Hold on to your hope as your triumph unfolds. He's never failing. He's never failing. So take courage, my heart. Stay steadfast, my soul. He's in the waiting. He's in the waiting. And hold on to your hope as your triumph unfolds. He's never failing. He's never failing. Oh.
Let me just pray. Father in heaven, I just ask that you would help us as we go out into our week this week to at least begin to throw some stones of truth that you are better, you are bigger, and that you win back at anything that may be coming against us. I thank you for the confidence we can have that you really do. When you said you do not need to be afraid, you meant it. and that there is a source of strength in you that can overcome any giant attempting to overcome us. I pray that, like Paul, we would live with such confidence in you that really would be the cry of our heart, that to live is Christ and even to die is gain. But meet us in the ache and in the pain of the places that we find ourselves, God, to give us confidence in you, to give us strength in you, to give us certainty in you, and to give us hope. And I pray this and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, as you go out this morning, just want to let you know, we have a family event for any of you in K-Kids, or you just got young kids, at Bear Creek this afternoon at 1 o'clock, so just around the corner from now. We were watching to see what the weather would do, so for any of you that were wondering whether or not we canceled it, it is on. We've, I believe, already sent people over there. The park is looking dry as the sun is out, so there will be a little bit of a light lunch. We got some hot dogs, some games, some fun, just a great time to meet other families and other Kensington people, so we'd love to have you come out and be a part of that with us. Otherwise, have a great week. You are so loved. We have a prayer team that is going to be down here at the front, as well as at the table in the lobby. We would love to pray with you and serve you if we can as you walk out. Have a great Sunday. See you next weekend.